Welcome back to another edition of the Health, Hope, and Happiness broadcast brought to you by Stifel. On today's segment of Ask Dr. Steve Graef, owner of Mindurance. Of course, it's an organization for one-on-one mental health coaching to help coaches and athletes manage their stress and enhance their performance. Today, we're actually going to talk about performance anxiety. So again, if we go by the dictionary definition, performance anxiety is defined by extreme nervousness experienced before or during participation in an activity taking place in front of an audience, whether that's 5 people or for you, Steve, it was 100,000 people at Ohio Stadium. As usual, we examine this topic from a variety of angles, including the coaches, athletes, and parents' perspective. But before diving in, Dr. Steve, I think it's probably normal. Almost every athlete feels a little bit of butterflies, nervousness before an event. As a coach, as an athlete, you probably want that because it means you're invested in the game. So talk about your own experiences and if you ever experienced performance anxiety before any of your athletic contests.
I absolutely have. And hello, Dan, the listeners. Good, awesome to be back on the podcast again. Yeah, for sure. Have experienced and continue to experience performance anxiety to this day, even as I give talks to large organizations, large groups of student athletes and such. I still get those butterflies in my stomach, predominantly because I care and I want it. I want it to go well. I want it to land well. And so I always say that, you know, performance anxiety is very much a natural byproduct of us putting ourselves into a challenging situation. I equate it actually to psychological sweat. And so you imagine if you were to go for just a regular workout, you put yourself in a physically demanding situation, you're exerting yourself, you're going to sweat. And it's not like we're like, whoa, where's that sweat coming from? It's very normal. And we expect ourselves to sweat because we're putting ourselves in this challenging situation. And the same thing occurs with performance anxiety and nerves. It's the psychological sweat that comes with putting ourselves in psychologically challenging or demanding situations. And those psychologically challenging and demanding situations are usually challenging and demanding because we care, because we want to do well. And so whenever I encounter a student athlete or a professional that's experiencing performance anxiety, I very much normalize it because it is part of the gig. If you want to do cool, new, exciting things, challenging things, guess what, y'all? You're going to experience some anxiety associated with it.
All right, today we're going to examine it from the parental side of things, which a lot of times is where I come into play with having supported my own kids. And in some cases, parents unwillingly put undue pressure on their athlete. They don't mean to. You're just talking about the game. You're talking about the experience. Parents bring up this is a must-win game, etc. How can parents be more supportive and apply less pressure to cause anxiety at home?
Yeah, well, I think focusing on effort and enjoyment rather than the outcomes is the nirvana. I mean, celebrating both achievements and effort equally. Um, but we know that that's challenging. I mean, we're recording this really near the Super Bowl, and I'm sure Donna Kelsey had some moments where she's like, this is the Super Bowl, and Travis by now probably has this stuff figured out. But even in the high school days and such, I'm sure that she would have found herself trying to navigate and hold both realities simultaneously, the reality that this is a really big game and I still love you for you. Just go out there, have fun, and give effort. So I think that's the dual realities that parents need to figure out how to hold. To acknowledge the moment and celebrate how big the moment is, while also re-emphasizing that, hey, go out, have fun, give effort, be a good teammate, listen to your coach, and see how it shakes out. Easier said than done, but if you can balance those two, I think you're off to a good start.
So if a parent coached their child through youth sports, much like I coached my son, as we've talked about before, that often may cause a parent to place more pressure on their athlete knowing more what he or she can do, as well as having coached those other kids what they can do. What are some tips that parents can kind of keep that in control too? Like they are no longer the coach, they are the spectator in that role.
I think it boils down to respecting the athlete's own autonomy and individual journey within their sport. You can ask open-ended questions like, "Hey, how are you experiencing your sport? How do you feel like you're progressing? Are you pleased with that? Do you want me to butt out?" I think that there's a lot more options available to us as parents than what we think, and our tendency is just to lean in hard, assume something's wrong or that our child isn't progressing in the way that we thought they were going to. But giving more space to this individuality, this autonomy, this openness, to kind of understand more from their son or daughter. What are your expectations? What do you want out of this? What are your goals? How do you feel you're progressing? And that can just share so much information, because if the child is also down on themselves, I just don't feel like I've gotten any better, and you're just pouring it on, that's not going to help the situation. But if that is how they're feeling, then maybe you can consider other resources, getting outside coaching or something like that, or personal trainer, whatever it might be, to maybe manage that, particularly if the child would want to grow and get better and stay more on track. So, but it would vary, and how we would resolve that would vary based on what we actually hear from the child and what their concerns are or how they're thinking about it.
Yeah, so actually during the game or before a game, I very much know from a parent's perspective, parents get excited too. They get nervous about the upcoming game. And so really, how can a parent kind of control their anxiety when they're really sitting there watching and really unable to do anything other than yell, whether that's at the coach, the athlete, or the ref that's just expressing their feelings during the game?
Yeah. Well, we chatted, I think, a little bit about this in a previous podcast, where there is some upstream exploration that I think we can do as parents to help extract and explore, what do we feel is at stake for us. So I mentioned that ultimately anxiety has two main influences: the fear of death and the fear of being alone. Now, neither of those are likely the case in high school athletics. So the fear of death really is about a fear of injury or getting hurt or getting re-injured. But then the other is kind of the social ego anxiety of, am I going to disappoint others? Am I going to disappoint myself? Am I falling short of my expectations, etc.? So, from a parental standpoint, if you find yourself getting really anxious, what is that about? Is it because if your child loses, they're going to be emotional and you're going to have to parent through that? Is this part of your self-esteem built upon your child's accolades, which gives you a little higher status in the community because your child is a good athlete? Or is it you're thinking about your own personal athletic journey and how bad you wanted to really succeed and you didn't, or maybe you did and you want to repeat that? Um, Thinking through some of that, I think, can sometimes help shine some light on what might be serving as an influence for that anxiety. So if you're able to do that, it may give you some more clues to be able to manage that a little bit more effectively. If you don't do that and you find yourself getting anxious, just try to acknowledge or ask yourself the question, am I making this better or worse for my athlete, son or daughter, or other athletes or other parents for that matter? And if you feel like what you're doing is not helping the situation, you should probably cut it out.
So if I'm a parent, I recognize my child has a little bit of performance anxiety, or recognize that also from a previous season. What can I do as a parent during the week to help my athlete control those feelings?
Yeah, well, sometimes it goes back to this open communication, asking the son or daughter, "Hey, what's going on?" Because we're not very good mind readers. A child could be getting anxious about an upcoming game for a variety of reasons. It could be because grandma and grandpa are going to be there for the first time. It could be because the parents are going to be there and they know what happens if they don't perform well. It could be because it's recruiting season and college coaches are going to be there. So there's a lot. It could be because the opponent, the last time they played that opponent, there was an individual on the other side that was particularly challenging and talked a lot of trash and was just nasty competing against that person. So there's a lot of things that could be tied up in this performance anxiety that, we may or may not know. So I think being open and asking the child what's going on, what support do they want from the parents? Because the parents don't necessarily need to fix anything, but just being open to what the child needs and how they can support can be super, super impactful. And of course, just reminding the child in a way that's appropriate is that, this is a game. this is a game. We want it to go well, but sometimes it doesn't, right? But either way, regardless of the outcome, we are here for you. We are your parents. We love you. We support you. We want the best of you. And so let's just go out there and have fun and play the sport that you enjoy playing. So those are some thoughts about how to manage some of those pre-week jitters.
So it all goes back to what you've talked about in previous podcasts, communication and intentionality. And so if parents are employing this all along through their athlete's journey, then a lot of this stuff can be alleviated before some of this starts.
You're absolutely right. And these somewhat heavy conversations we're having now become a lot less heavy because they're just a natural part of the participating in athletics journey. And then it's the same of the participating in academics journey and the participating in the first job journey. So the skills and the belief systems and the perspectives and the tools and interventions that parents and athletes alike are learning through this part of the journey are going to serve them well as they approach young adult and adult life.
And as always, as we wrap up our segments, we always give you an opportunity to add in a final comment here or expand upon something we've already talked about that maybe just popped into your mind. So how do you want to summarize parents dealing with their athletes' performance anxiety?
Yeah, I think, sometimes as parents, if we see a child that is particularly anxious, we might not get it. Maybe we're a parent who personally did not engage in sport, or you didn't get anxious or as anxious as your son or daughter is getting prior to a performance. So you might not feel like you understand it. And you may be inclined to kind of, well, just don't worry about it. Like, it's not that big a deal. Just don't worry about what are you so worried for? Like, you got this. And some of those messages don't always come across that great. So just keep in mind, even though it might not be a big deal to you, it could be a big deal to your child. And if you feel like you might be too close to it, then it's okay to maybe consider more professional or expert help. Individuals like myself who deal in day out performance anxiety. I would say that probably 75% of my clients come to me because they're experiencing some type of performance anxiety. And usually all it takes is like a session or two to change the relationship that they're having with the sport and themselves, to kind of crack the code to help them to be able to manage the anxiety a little more effectively. It's not always that quick, but it's amazing just how viewing the situation a little bit different and having somebody other than your parents present that alternative can have a profound impact.
Yeah, kids never like to listen to their parents. Let me tell you that sometimes.
So true. So true.
As always, we appreciate the time Dr. Steve affords us talking about these topics. Again, another great conversation around this time, performance anxiety. If you do have another topic you would like to discuss, as always, you can let us know. Otherwise, until the next time, we appreciate you listening to the Health, Hope, and Happiness podcast, brought to you by Stifel. Have a good one.
We'll see you, everybody.